Thank you for staying on the show. You heard Ashanti Regional Minister Simon Osei-Mensah, who says most alleged acts of corruption are perpetrated by public officials and civil servants purported to be Christians. You also heard Chairperson of the Kumasi Presbytery of the Global Evangelical Church, Reverend Dr. Rosalind Fuga, who is blaming corruption in Ghana on the failure of the church to impact the lives of its members. Well, our guest for this conversation is Reverend Dr. Opuni Frimpong. He's Executive Director, Alliance for Christian Advocacy Africa. He's also a former General Secretary of the Christian Council of Ghana. Great to have you here, sir. Do you agree with Dr. Fuga?
Yes, let me say good morning to your cherished viewers. And I must also say that when the regional minister was addressing the conference, I was in the room, so I heard him. I must say that when we talk about the place or the role of the church in the fight against corruption, we must put it into proper context. Now, the church, yes, pursue Christian education, discipleship, making, hoping that we will build up our members in matters of morality. What we must understand quickly is that when it comes to law enforcement, the church doesn't have the backbone. What the church does is admonishing people, do the right things. It is true that some members will listen to the teachings of the church and do the right thing. However, if we get some church members who, for whatever reason, decide not to be law-abiding, you don't go back to the church. You go to the law enforcement agency. In fact, when the regional minister said in the room that he doesn't sign check, and therefore, if it comes to corruption, we must go for the technocrats, I asked myself, what is his supervisory role? What does it mean to have the police, the CID, all the institutions that must be able to know that somebody is doing something untoward and bring them to book? And he pursuing that the report we received at Parliament from the Auditor General, the district chief executives in his region are brought to book. What is his role? I was sitting behind him and I kept my thought to myself, but to some large extent, I disagree with him. The church does not enforce laws. Our leaders, the political parties, must be willing to disown their members who are into corruption. If we focus on the church for the corruption fight, it seems to me we are not serious as a nation with the corruption fight.
Doc, perhaps you say that the church's role is to preach to its members, encourage them to abide by the law, but the church doesn't enforce the laws. Fair enough. Perhaps Dr. Fuga's concern is that the church is not doing enough when it comes to speaking boldly about these things and telling its members, do not involve yourself in this. Or, like you mentioned, if a member of a church has been found to be engaged in corrupt acts, is the church also willing to, quote unquote, disown that member?
In fact, we have, now that is to me the challenge we must address. We have political leaders that see corruption outside their circles. Corruption is in their opponent, their enemies, among themselves. You know, and normally when they are in opposition, they see corruption. When they are in power and government, they see themselves as angels, and the enemy is out there. We as a church or Christian body, yes, must continue teaching, but even whether those in government, those in power are prepared to listen to the church when it comes to matters of corruption, whether they don't fight back, they want to hear what they want to hear. But that is what the church must avoid. The church must speak truth to power. Now when we are in election and we are having cheating and we are having violence, we don't go back to church. You talk about the managers of the country. You talk about managers of election. You talk about state institution, security. You don't talk to church. When we have governments that are signing contracts, recently in Europe, you find a whole prime minister in UK that during COVID, he broke the law. He has been fined. I am praying and hoping to see government that would disown their own and allow their own to be punished. If you are not ready to do that, you don't go and find excuses and hide behind church. Faith-based organizations that can only admonish. So the church must not quickly accept the language the politicians are, throwing about. You have failed. They have failed. Corruption is among them, and they are covering their own. I pray and hope that parties, MPP campaign on corruption. Now let us see how they fight their own, not their opponents.
All right.
Now they are among themselves. You see angels. The enemy is out there. So churches must not easily accept that slogan.
All right.
Churches have not failed.
Okay. So, sorry that I had to interject you there. So, is the church doing enough? You've clearly spelled out, and that's fair comment to say the church cannot implement or the church cannot enforce the laws when it comes to corruption or put in structures that make it impossible for people to be corrupt. The church cannot do that. The state has to do that. The church's role is to advocate. The church's role is to preach to its members. My question, and I would like you to answer this as simply as possible, do you think the church is doing enough in that regard?
It depends on what you put into that concept, enough. I go to church every Sunday. I teach my members. Some will obey and go out and do what they have heard. That is church. Jesus says, those who have ears, let them hear. Others will go out and, like any children, parents will tell you, when you go out, don't do this, do that. Some will go out, do what parents have asked them to do. Others will go out and do the opposite. I expect that those who do the opposite, the system will correct them. I expect that those who enforce laws, they are driving roughly on our roads. Now you have political party MPP during constituency election. And look at what is going on. If they are Christians, they must arrest them. It has nothing to do with church. They are breaking laws. Arrest them, punish them. If government officials, whether they are church elders or whatever, are breaking laws, punish them. That has nothing to do with the church. So the church is doing enough. But enough depends on who you talk to. The politicians who are hiding behind something, they want something to hide behind, want to push the blame on the church. But church people must speak truth to power. They must tell that to them, that you signed a contract. You are awarding all the galamsey thing we are saying. It's not pastors who are doing it. You are doing. You know your people who are involved. You know all those who leave office and carry all the vehicles and other things. Now we say we have 12 billion cedis from the Auditor General's. Go and chase them. They are your people. If they are not prepared to do that, it's just a pie in the sky cliche. It's a simplistic way of solving problem that if we are not having, we are not succeeding in the corruption fight, the church has failed. It's difficult to accept that.
All right, Doc. Now, we talk about the contracts that government agencies sign and all that. Aren't we oversimplifying the corruption problem? Because, and when we put it at the feet of the politicians, aren't we oversimplifying it? Because for people like Dr. Fuga, the everyday things we do, people walk into offices, go to the hospital, they want to get a certain favor, they give somebody a little here, a little there. Aren't these things all contributing to the endemic nature of corruption in our country? And these people who engage in these day-to-day activities, many of them sit in our churches every day, and they still go ahead to do these things.
No, let's get it. That's why I said let's put this discussion in context. I go to an organization, you mentioned hospital, any hospital, they have quality assurance department. If I was in hospital in South Africa, you enter, they give you color red. You move on, they give you blue, yellow, and green. And there's somebody's job is to make sure you don't exceed the time that you are supposed to be under color red, blue, and they will go straight to whoever is not making the system work. And that is not the job of the pastor. Quality assurance, law enforcement agencies, what are they supposed to do? So I'm saying that if I get a Christian who will allow the word of God to work in him or her and go to work to do the right thing, praise God. If I get another Christian who will go to work late, who will steal papers, who will use office time, even to attend prayer meeting, I will want discipline to be enforced. That is the problem we have in this country. We have, it's not only those at the top, traditional leaders on our roads, and you have politicians who will protect their own. Let them begin to disown their members, and it will be a lesson. But when I know that we finished election, and people who were into violence and all that are going around, and the law will allow them, because they know my party is in power. You can do nothing to us. People are not working. You work with an accountant in the office, and he knows that he carries party card. There's nothing that those with supervisory role can do to him. Then you go back to the church. The system is sick. Ghana needs to be born again. Address that. We are a corrupt society, but those who have the power to make the system sound must sit up and work. So when you leave them and you go to the church, those that have admonition role that do it, I will go to those who have enforcement role that sit up. You are failing us. You are signing contracts that are disgraceful.
Doc, I wanted a clear-cut response on my earlier question about whether the church is admonishing its members enough, because there are those who believe that the messages have changed over time. Even within the church, there are leaders who've had cause to complain about what they call the prosperity message, where it's as though having enough money is a validation of your faith or a validation of something you're doing right with God. So there are those who argue that these messages compel members to engage in some of these corrupt activities and bring money to the church, because sometimes in some churches, the more money you have, the more respect you're given, the more responsibilities you're given. So on the bit of admonition and the kind of messages the churches are given, are we also doing the best that we can?
I like that. And that is how I want to understand the EP minister's statement, that let us go back to the drawing board and find out, because there are new realities, emerging challenges, how we are responding to emerging realities. So the church must reposition itself to respond to emerging challenges and realities in our time. Having said that, we are talking about corruption fights. And as for that, look at the effort media people are making, whether it's cocoa that people are smuggling, whether it's galamsey. Some of them have been beaten, some of them have been in prison. Look at the effort certain individuals have made in our hospitals, people who are selling babies. Now that one, you don't go to church and ask, are we doing enough? You must ask, what are the intelligent institutions here for? In fact, there's something that we must be concerned about. There are so many issues until media people raise the issues. When media people raise the issue, then the CID and the police and all that will sit up. As if media is now doing the work that those who have been paid to do such intelligent work, media is doing for them. That one is not church. In fact, even Ghanaian media is going beyond, doing all this kind of work that people who have been paid. And even when they have done that, you find people who will still go and attack them, seize their gadget, These are the things we are talking about. That one has nothing to do with church. They must be put behind bars. Even if they are pastors and they are misbehaving. This short period of IGP Dampare, and we pray that he stay focused, he doesn't change. Even pastors who were all over the place making noise and deceiving people, you realize that the tempo is going down. Let's allow the laws of this country to work. And the law must work for all of us, not some of us. And at the moment, sometimes you get impression that depending on who you associate with, you can do all the evil things and get away with it. That is the issue we must address. So yes, church may need to go back to the drawing board and reposition ourselves to respond to emerging realities. But the blame must get back to those who have the power to enforce laws and sanitize the situation. And I must say, I dare say, at the moment, we have a very worrying situation.
Interesting, Doc. We are getting live reactions to our conversation on Facebook, because we're on Facebook Live as well. And talking about repositioning, there are those who have the view that church leaders themselves sometimes create the perception that they are with certain governments. And so when government changes hands, then you don't have them speaking about the ills of society as much as they did when previous governments came over. Someone just commented about that. Your quick thoughts on that as well.
You know, especially in this country, I have had opportunity to serve as Christian Council General Secretary under NDC, and I have played some roles under the current administration. When they are in opposition, I have taken time. I recently gave public lecture at Koforidua. I have studied under the Fourth Republic and the past 10 years, issues that the churches have raised in their communique and public statement. They are the same. The themes are the same. The things that the churches talk about, church leaders talk about under NDC are not different from. But when you do that, they sent their wild dogs to come and attack you. And when the tables turn and you say the same thing, then they feel, no, why are you talking about sins? Don't talk about sins. The very people who were in opposition, who were clapping for you, and those who were in power, who felt that you are their worst enemies, now when they are in opposition, they fall on you. Why are you not saying this? Why are you not saying that? When they were in power, you said the same thing, and they were attacking you. They were insulting you. So our leaders are not ready for objective public discourse. That's the real problem. Now you find that the parties have set their members on Facebook, on social media. So you whisper, and quickly you know who is talking. You know where those statements are coming from. We need objectivity in public discourse in Ghana. It is not there at the moment. And especially media houses that are being controlled by politicians. Now media space has become another challenge, even for church leaders, because you are not sure the kind of editorial policies that they are running. So, yes, it sounds good to say those things, but it's difficult to travel far with such sentiment.
Talking about the media space, yesterday we had quite a lengthy discussion on press freedom and Ghana's recent ranking. Your quick thoughts on that as well.
I watched my brother Akapo and Professor Jampo. Yeah, Professor Jampo was saying that we must do our own internal assessment. I agree with him, but to a point. You see, I'm teaching at the university. At the university, whether you are assessing, say, PhD student, MPhil student, or even colleague lecturers for promotion, you do internal assessment, but you find independent external assessment as well. So I agree with him that we must do our internal assessment, but we must allow outsiders also to assess us. Now we have external examiners and others. So fine, you may not agree with them, but we need to appreciate external assessment on our performance. And that is the point. I find it difficult to continue the trip with Professor Jampo. Now, I may not go to that extent of what is in the report, but I have seen in whatever they call themselves security, national security people attacking journalists in this country, all because they took pictures where they were not supposed to take pictures. They have been beaten. We have seen terrible things. Some of your friends at Multimedia, and their crime was that they were out there bringing stories for Ghanaians. That was their only crime. And that is where I will go and say that if we have, and you see, there's a correlation between democracy and free speech. And if Ghanaian journalists are subjected to this, all their crime is going out there gathering information for the Ghanaian public to know. During the elections, some were beaten. And that is what we are addressing. So whether it's external or internal, there are existential facts, realities, that it's not easy for some journalists to do their work. There are those who are going overboard, sometimes if they are suffering from verbal diarrhea. That's not the group I'm talking about. But there are those who just want to go out, bring facts, and they are being attacked. They are being threatened. And if we want to do anything at all, that concern must be addressed. That one, it has nothing to do who paid for the research and all that. We know that there are journalists who have been sent in the name of national security, and they come out to give their report that we were mishandled. If these things are with us, it's shameful, and that democracy, free speech attack, we must be worried as a country.
Let's go back to a substantive issue on the church and corruption, even as we prepare to wrap up. The latest corruption perception index puts Denmark at the top in terms of countries with less corruption or perception of corruption. And in having this conversation, I just wanted to find out what the religious standing of its population was. And it's interesting to know that Denmark has about 77% of its population identifying as Christians, believing in Jesus Christ. Based on what we've said so far, you think that it is just too simple to correlate and say because a large percentage of the population is Christian, it would definitely translate into a good CPI score. I mean, looking at these two countries, Denmark and Ghana also has over 70% of its population identifying as Christians, but a CPI score is low. But for you, it is too simplistic to say the two correlate.
You see, you are talking about national values, ethical values. Ghana, what are our national values? What are the values that we cherish, that we teach, that are part of the curriculum we run in our schools? That is what you get in Denmark that you don't get here. What are the national values that we protect? That is why I have said again and again that education without moral and spiritual values will always produce intelligent criminals. Now go to those countries and they have national values. Go to Japan. Common humanity is core value in the curriculum in schools, right from primary one. They teach this. They don't only teach science and engineering and mathematics. They teach national values. They are core education. You are not only a medical professional, you are a human being. So they have factored, and those values are equally Christian values. So we must be very careful. If you are talking about Denmark and other countries that have been able to push such values of truthfulness, that if you are a leader and now if you're even a prime minister and you break the law, they will fine you. Now find out what are national values, values that the president cannot break. And if he does, he will be dealt with. What are they? What are the values that our members of parliament should not break? And if they break, they will be dealt with. What are national values for traditional leaders? Even when we are writing examination, are we a nation with national values? Are we proud of our national values? What are they? Who are enforcing them? When and how? If we can answer the question, then we can do the correlation you are raising. Some countries, whether Christians or not, have been able to factor values, sound human values, into their national psyche. That is not what we are doing here. Now the thinking is give them science, give them engineering, give them aerospace, and Ghana will develop. You end up producing intelligent criminals. And I don't know how many we have produced so far.
Interesting, Doc. You talk about a national psyche and national values. How then do we integrate this into our society? Because clearly, I'm not sure that we have that as part of our curriculum, where across the board, we are instilling certain values that as Ghanaians, we have agreed that this is what we stand for, and every Ghanaian must identify with it.
I hope somebody will listen to you this morning. We have not seriously considered national values as a national issue. In fact, the issue we are talking about, corruption, moral decadence, has not been considered by our leaders, those in government, as a national challenge. They don't consider that as, in fact, they don't feel ashamed themselves. They pride themselves in corruption. They are thieves. That is the word we must now focus on. Now, how do we get people who get to public service to appreciate that the word is service? They don't go and take what belongs to ordinary people. Some of them even have legal backing. You hear allowances, people are being paid salaries, and they are getting drivers, they are getting vehicles, they are paying inconvenience allowance. Go to the nurses, hospitals, and feel what nurses and teachers are going through. Who pays them inconvenience allowances? But such things are backed even by law. Look at what is going on. When we are close to election, can you trust them? The monies they use for campaign, can they account for the money? How many of them send their financial report, the political party, to YESI? And then you can trust that this is a true reflection. We have constitution that say that after every election, after some month, all of them must go and disclose the sources of the funds that they use for election. Have you heard that? You are a media people. What are our national values? What are they? Go to NPP and ask them that question. What are the values they are protecting? Ask NDC. They themselves, what are the ethical standards they have set for themselves? That if you are with me in my government and you go to US and other countries, they have ethics decks that any contract will be examined. Anything that the president does, is assessed. Do we have seriously ethical standard for ministries, for presidency, for parliament? What are they? And the question you are raising, I pray and hope that will bring us to a national conversation. What are our national values and how are we pursuing them? Now, school children are going all out for a pop, and parents buy the questions for them. And when these people finish, what are the values you expect from them? And of course, church people, we are also part of it. But when it comes to corruption fight, it's a serious issue and it's beyond the church. So church people must be careful when they are coming to the conversation. Don't accept responsibilities that are over and above you. Corruption must be fought by those who have been given the mandate to do so. Church people, you don't have the power to imprison anybody. Talk to the right people to do the right things.
Doc, you mentioned allowances. And I remember when the conversation on neutrality allowances came up, the demand by ClockSAC, there were those who said this feeds into the perception then that once you become a politician, it means that you have access to some wealth, or it puts you at a certain position to make some money. And so once I cannot identify with the party, then you must pay me for it. Your quick reaction.
We must address. I teach with a colleague, say, at the university. We know the cars we've been driving. He jumped into politics as whatever. And within a matter of months, he's building, story building, building number 1, building number 2. He has parked the old, Toyota Corolla he was using, and a Land Cruiser V81, and another. Now, if this is what politics and democracy means, then every Ghanaian must have that kind of resources. How come that people get into politics? Before 4 years. Why? How come, if this is the economy of Ghana, then let everybody benefit from the system? How come that people get into politics and overnight their economic situation has changed and changed and changed? So we have a systematic problem that we have to address. Now everybody is jumping into politics. They are not there to serve. They know what they can get because the system protects them. And we need to address it. That's why there's a call for even constitutional review. But when they are in opposition, they see what is wrong with the constitution. When they are in power and it's working for them, they close their eyes. I have seen people who, when they were in opposition, were calling for order to be, things to be streamlined, security agencies. Now they are in power. And I doubt if they will ever address. We are still praying and hoping that they will begin, even to the civil service, that they will structure. But as long as it works well for them, that is where we find ourselves where we are. We have a challenge that has been infused into the system, and we need to address it.
And so are you part of those who say that approving or implementing this neutrality allowance then means that we are endorsing that perception?
In fact, it's not only that one. It's the whole Article 71. The whole Article 71. If it's not benefiting some people, we need a leader who will say that with the economic challenges we are going through, how do we pay somebody his or her main salary? With what kind of qualification? And we pay them their main salary. We give them wardrobe allowance. We give them fuel, free, whatever. They have drivers, and now you give them inconvenience allowance. So that one is just one of them. You your friend, one of them, Newsfire, listed the allowances. Go back to them. How many Ghanaians attract those allowances? And what kind of animal farm are we running at the moment? Are some Ghanaians better human beings than others? That some deserve inconvenience allowance, but those who are working under under the bridge and all that, how much do we give to them? The nurses, the doctors, those who are working in a mortuary hospital, how much inconvenience allowance do you give? And they come up to say, we receive 1,000 cedis a month. What kind of system are we running? And we must understand that democratic dictatorship in democracy as worse as military dictatorship. And we must be careful about dictatorship of the majority. We are gradually getting there. The dictatorship of the majority is as dangerous as military dictatorship. Now there are a group of people who know we can get whatever we want, and others are crying. So we must be careful. I have said it. I'm saying that majority dictatorship is as dangerous as military dictatorship. Let's avoid it.
We are not there yet. Are you saying we are there yet, or we are inching closer?
Sometimes you get the signals that if we don't do things right, we are getting there.
I appreciate your time this morning, Reverend Dr. Opuni Frimpong, Executive Director, Alliance for Christian Advocacy Africa. And we've been talking about the church and corruption because we heard from Reverend Dr. Fuga, who is a member of the Presbytery of the EP Church in the Ashanti region, saying that the church must be blamed for endemic corruption in the country. Well, Dr. Opuni Frimpong disagrees. He says the church only has an admonition role, and it is the state and its actors who are responsible for implementing or enforcing the law.